Growth was in the air in the 50s and 60s. A new freeway was being planned. New cities were to sprawl up and down the coast. A 4-lane Alpine Parkway was to replace our Alpine Road. An ancient route used by Native Americans, later the Spanish, the Mexicans, and early American settlers up Coal Mine Ridge was to be resurrected and connect directly to the new coastal communities. Well into his 70s, lawyer turned UC Regent John Francis Nyland's last fight was very local. He liked Ladera and wanted to build something similar on his 1,500-acre Corte Madera ranch, what we now think of as the Windy Hill Open Space Preserve. He knew the pro-growth county wouldn't stop him, but if the town of Portola Valley were to incorporate, local control over zoning and growth would scale back his ambitions. The fight against incorporation was his last. Once again, no one within the range of his voice was indifferent to him. His fellow owners of large tracts of land loved him. The rest of Portola Valley, the people who ultimately would have the votes, he would attack in long-winded public screeds mailed directly to all town residents. In just one example of his vitriol, he would refer to the town's founding fathers as a small clique of lately arrived smart aleck snobs, crackpot theorists, fakers, and gullible figureheads. But then, after a short illness, he died. Rumors and speculation on Windy's fate would ripple through the town for 7 years. In '63, Nyland's heirs sold to William Kelly's firm. The next year, Portola Valley was incorporated. Not recognizing how the political environment had shifted, HBK completed their studies, and William's brother Ryland made the proposal to the town. Of Nyland's 1,500 acres, 39% would remain as open space. The steepest, most inaccessible areas would not be built out, but on the rest, HBK would create a new Ladera with an additional much larger area above, one with bigger lots and bigger homes. There would be 450 homes on 1/3 acre lots, 330 homes would get 2/3 of an acre, 120 homes would be built on 4-acre mini estates. Ryland would call it a simple solution to the natural features of the area. Citing a heartfelt concern over landslides, the newly formed Portola Valley Planning Commission tentatively approved a build-out of just 376 homes. HBK's attorney and Portola Valley resident Pete McCloskey, a man who would go on to be another one of Portola Valley's most influential residents, called the new rules unconstitutional. He would be quoted, "The land's owners are guaranteed equal protection. 1,200 families on 1,200 acres can't demand more rights than the owners of 1,200 acres across the road. If this case goes to court, the town could face great financial loss." New zoning rules were made to apply more equally to all lands within the town. The maximum build-out was increased to 461 homes. Citing the development's loss of financial viability, Herr Brewer and Kelly largely withdrew from the project. McCloskey in the next 5 years was elected to Congress. He co-authored the Endangered Species Act, and as one of the few anti-war Republicans, challenged President Nixon for his party's nomination in 1972. He lost. We have digressed. Back to our story. By '77, HBK would sell off most of the northern half of its property, including Spring Ridge. Pioneering venture capitalist and founder of Osborne Computer and 3Com, Jack Melchor was the buyer, but he'd made a development deal for Spring Ridge with developer Frank Aries. Frank had recently married into the Pritzker family, owners of the Hyatt hotel chain. It was by 1972 that the war and a new environmental consciousness had taken over American life. That year, the Room to Breathe initiative created the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. Citing a need for a privately held financial partner dedicated to land conservation, one that could quietly and privately buy and conserve land and provide tax benefits to sellers, Mid-Pen's first executive director, Herb Grinch, with the help of many Portola Valley residents, found post the Peninsula Open Space Trust. In Post's first acquisition, HBK donates its steepest, most difficult to build on land to Post. In one transaction, 525 acres are conserved. Post is launched, and HBK gets a tax write-off. For $1.7 million, Post then sold to Mid-Penn, and the Windy Hill Open Space Preserve was established. We all love what has become the 1,500-acre Windy Hill Open Space Preserve, but the most important legacy of the battles over its development was, and still is, the creation of the Peninsula Open Space Trust. Since its founding, Post has gone on to facilitate the conservation of 80,000 acres on the San Francisco Peninsula. With this donation, the Windy Hill summit was preserved, but not all of the mostly grassy slopes of Spring Ridge, lands that extend almost all the way to the summit. Frank Aries proposed 96 2,000 to 3,000 square foot homes in a series of clusters on the lower slopes of Spring Ridge. Up higher, he proposed 28 3,000 to 5,000 square foot homes that would be built along the edge of Spring Ridge Meadow. If the town tightened the density rules, as it had been considering, Aries threatened to build a more conventional subdivision covering Spring Ridge. The 6'4" 300-pound Aries would be quoted, "I'm not doing it for love. I'm doing it for profit. I love money. I am in business for profit and I make profit." In a more positive development, Mid-Penn says quite directly to the town, "If you want trails, you'll have to build them." Although the Windy Hill Trail wouldn't connect to the summit for 6 years, volunteers and cash donations got Razorback, Hams Gulch, and the Lost Trails built in a single year. By 84, Frank Aries had contracted his development request because of additional costs imposed by the town and Cal Water. Other distractions and possibly sheer fatigue had a role as well. Frank's son reported that Portola Valley had become a low priority and that his father had moved to Tucson so that he could focus on a new 12,000-acre development there. Aries opted to donate most of his land, take a tax write-off, and build just 10 homes above the sequoias. 3 years later, the situation had further evolved. Mid-Penn negotiated the purchase of Spring Ridge with some conditions. They said to the town, "We'll buy the 450 acres if you're okay with a parking lot on Portola Road." Citing concerns over increased traffic and a worry that parking may spill onto Portola Road, the Planning Commission voted against the proposal, but knew that ultimately the town council would decide the matter when it voted just 1 week later. The citizens were excited. A 30-year battle over development would have a very happy ending if the town council approved the deal. They did. Mid-Penn board member and local conservation activist Betsy Crowder would write, "My heart is joyful because the dream of many years is finally going to become a reality." In 1988, the anniversary trail was built. Finally, there was a trail to Windy Summit. Post acquires the last 200 acres of HBK land. Down from an initial request to build 900 homes, 30 years later, just 2 new homes have been built. Mid-Penn now owns almost all the land Nyland once owned, but not the villa surrounded by open space. Over the years, it's been owned by investment groups, a disgraced commodities trader, and a Japanese industrialist. It's currently owned by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt and his wife Wendy.